Hey, welcome everybody to another excellent episode of the Preaching Lab podcast. As always, this is
Don't
Jason Goodwin.
overpromise. Hey, don't overpromise.
As
How do you
always,
know
this
this
is
is going to be
Jason
excellent?
Goodwin coming from beautiful Ruston, Louisiana, and I'm joined as always by the I don't know don't know how to describe you. The
Excellent. Just use that word
excellent
again.
excellent.
The
You want to go
excellent.
excellent? Okay, the
Yeah.
excellent Adam Wayne Thomas. Adam, how are you, brother? How are things?
Things are good, brother. Things are good.
Okay, Wyatt's being nice to you. You're
Man,
are you
people when it comes to Wyatt, people will say, that's amazing. You're an amazing guy staying at church for 26 years. Man, I know how good I got it here. It is my time here is much more about the graciousness of this people and how good. Now they could chuck me out tomorrow. They could do me wrong tomorrow, but man, I just to whom else would I go? Uh is how I think about this church. And man, God is just blessed. I love these people, and I love it.
I mean, I just you are a blessed man, Adam. I mean, you found an incredible woman in Crystal who's willing to put up with you, and then you have this church that is the same way. And is I mean, you brother, I don't ever want to hear any complaints
Yeah.
uh coming from old AT, because brother, you've been very providentially blessed in those ways. So I'm glad to hear it. It's encouraging to hear pastors brag on their wives, brag on their churches in these types of ways where, I mean, they're giving God the glory, not themselves, because I think it's a testament of the fact that there are healthy churches out there. There are good churches out there. And it's one of those things when people kind of start running the church down and start being critical of the church in broad brush ways, it you know, it kind of frustrates me. And as somebody who's gone through their fair share of church hurt and pain, I want us to be very careful about painting all churches in this broad brush category, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately it's Christ's bride, it's not mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be very cautious about that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I think we've teed it up well for what I asked us to talk about for this podcast. Very, very well done.
Thank you.
Do we ruin the tee up if we praise the tee up?
Probably.
I don't know.
Probably.
So what we want to talk about today is, or what I ask you, I think this would be a good subject, is what do we do when the church fails? How do we deal with the failure of the church? And I guess we also need to talk about how do we distinguish what is kind of not really a failure, just us misunderstanding the church, to true failure of the church. And how do we help people? We've all had members come to our church carrying what they call church hurt these days. We have we'll actually need to talk also about what happens when the church hurts you as the pastor. And so that's what we're talking about today, is how do we look at church failure without it causing us to deconstruct our faith or to have bitterness towards the church, when the church maybe isn't what we thought it was or wished that it could be. So just walking through some ways, let's walk through some ways of, and these are things that I've dealt with in hearing
Hmm.
people talk about the church, or people that I went to Bible college with or youth group with, and how they are not in the church anymore, and the reasons they give for not being in the church. So one thing, like good intention, like what I think is good intentions gone wrong, and what I mean by that is, hey, purity culture, it's under a lot of criticism these days for like growing up in kind of an abstinence movement and all of that. And when I look back at it, like a lot of times people look at that as like, man, the church was just wanting to shame everyone and their sexuality, and it was all about a shame culture and all of that, and that's why they don't have any place for the church. And man, I really like I struggle with like, man, there were good intentions there. Like people, like youth ministers and pastors were just wanting kids to maintain their virginity until they got married, which is a good thing, which is a biblical thing. Now, could I go back through and look at um, stuff was not rooted in the gospel as it should have been. It wasn't Christ centered enough, and it was more of a moral thing and not a Christ centered thing. I absolutely there. I can criticize some of that purity culture, and some of the criticism is okay. But man, but there's like people walk around like there's just these evil people that wanted to shame us and keep us from almost like they wanted to keep us pure. What like was a good thing. And so I think there's some things I put the same emphasis on, like, a lot of times putting pressure on kids to be saved. Like I can criticize some of that, but man, it's not like they were trying to hurt kids and wanting kids to be baptized 3 times and not understand what they were doing. And so what do you think about that? Do you think a lot of times like there is good intention there, maybe some things were done wrong, but it's kind of almost overblown where they make like the church this huge villain when maybe the church was trying to do some really great things, but we're just doing some of it in a wrong way or with some skewed theology.
Yeah, no, I think those are two very good examples. I think number one, I think what's often overlooked is what you mentioned first, and it's good intentions. I think that's an easy thing to kind of just gloss over, especially with those two examples. Because number one, yeah, is it purity something we're all supposed to be pursuing as Christians, and wouldn't that be something that we would want to see children, grandchildren, all the rest of it kind of pursue? And secondly, I mean, even more so than that, coming to Christ, being saved. I mean, those are very good things we believe as Christians. They're very helpful, and when you put them in their proper context too. I mean, you talk about a lot of the people in the midst of purity culture. What was happening in the '80s and '90s as you saw this growth? Well, I mean, you just had Roe v. Wade passed in the mid '70s, so you see this uptick in abortions, or at least abortion on demand is becoming more of an issue politically, but also, I mean, we would say that it's not simply a political issue; it's a moral and it's a social issue. It's a biblical issue because it's of human life. Also, you see the uptick in sexually transmitted diseases and all the rest of it. And so, what do you want young people to do? Hey, don't have sex. How about that? Don't engage in premarital sex, and you don't have to worry about, do I keep this baby or do I kill this baby? You don't have to worry about, hey, do I have a sexually transmitted disease that may jeopardize the rest of my life? Those were serious concerns in those decades. I mean, it's so I think it's not fair if we're just critical of those things from a, hey, you came at it the wrong way standpoint, and you made me feel shame and you made me feel embarrassment, because maybe there was some shame and embarrassment you should have had. Now, how do we go too far in those areas? Well, when that shame and embarrassment begins to blame victims of maybe some abuse or maybe some of misguided actions, when that begins to shame those people, then that's where we've gone too far.
Yeah.
And I know, Matt Chandler years ago had the famous "He Wants the Rose" sermon and that sort of thing, and that's a very good way to kind of push back against those things. Is thankfully in the gospel there is forgiveness for all
Mhm.
of these things, and that's what we hold. But a lot of that stuff would have been better understood if we would have simply assumed that those teaching these things, preaching these things, were doing so because they had good intentions, and I think that would have solved a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes I think I do something like it seems like people are, you know, zero in on good intentions in a lot of areas in church that for some reason they just man, they just dismiss it as just evil and wrong instead of just like what were the good intentions that went about the wrong way. So I think church discipline, I've dealt with a lot of times with people leave the church over church discipline, sometimes because of neglect of church discipline. Nothing was
Yeah.
done when someone was done sinning, and sometimes church discipline done too harshly. And so we had a case here at Wyatt. I had that we dealt with church discipline. We had one family leave because we were not strict enough, not hard enough on the people, and I had a
Hmm.
family leave because we didn't do enough. That we were, um, or that we one family left because we were too hard. One family left because we were too soft in the church discipline case. It's not. Sometimes it's like, well, what
Was
do
it
you
the same
want?
case?
Yeah, same case, same exact case. And it's like, hey, and sometimes it's just like, man, church, things like church discipline, when you do take a step to take some kind of action, man, that is hard. And I know MacArthur, God rest his soul, had, he faced a lot of criticism for one particular case. And man, some of it sounds bad when you hear it from one side, but it's also like this is like a 25-year-old case, and like it's so easy to like on the outside to dissect when you don't know when these people knew certain things about that particular case. And so it's so easy to pick apart what pastors did in a certain case when it's 25 years removed and you don't know how things unfolded. um and there's sometimes I think hypercriticism when it comes to church discipline. It's
Well,
just
I think you're
every church
exactly
discipline
right.
is so complex and hard.
Yeah, and I think there's gonna be some where anytime you even mention the words church discipline, you're gonna get a group of people that are like, I'm out. Like that, this
Mhm,
is not the church should never do this. Like this is
mhm,
not, especially in a 21st century setting. Like this is, you're going to get those that just have the mentality that the church does not have a right to speak into the lives of other people in this kind of way and to hold them accountable to their confession or to the covenant or anything like that that they've agreed upon in becoming members. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of churches not having a formal membership or anything like that that we would say, no, we think is pretty important and pretty actually necessary for churches to function in the way that the New Testament would have them to function. And so anytime you bring up church discipline or it becomes a need, you're going to have those who are immediately, I'm out. Like this is nope. I didn't sign up for this, even though you actually did. And so they're gone.
mhm,
Then you have the others that it feels like they're just waiting to see, did you do it the way that I think you should have done it? And then more than likely, if they have that mentality, they're already going to say, no matter what you do, you did it wrong. That very few people, it's like discernment bloggers very rarely say, "Hey, that guy did a good job, and I'm happy that they did what they did." I mean, the whole purpose of that genre was to be critical of what was being done in the church, right? And
mhm,
so you have those type of people that they're just looking to be critical of anything that the church is trying to do, especially when it comes to these types of activities where you're holding people accountable and you're actually trying to discipline them, not embarrass them, not hurt them, but you're actually trying to discipline them in the word so that they can grow in obedience and faithfulness to Christ. And you're never going to make everyone happy in these types of cases. You're
yeah,
not. But
yeah,
that's not a reason, especially if a church is trying to do it the right way. That's not a reason to say we're out of here.
mhm, yeah. Okay, so what about, I've heard criticism of the church neglected me or my family when we went through this hard time. Like my pastors weren't there like I thought they should have been. The church wasn't there like I thought they should have been. So I've dealt with some of that. What do you think we should view that kind of criticism of the church wasn't there when I needed it?
Well, I think that's another one of those cases where, well, this time there's this. Okay, I'll say it this way. I think this is a case of, first of all, the pastor, the staff, whoever is involved, probably needs to get the clarity. in the situation, and be willing to take more ownership if necessary, and say, "Hey, maybe no, you're right. We were we got sidetracked, or we forgot about you, or whatever it is you need to say to take ownership of the fact that, yeah, maybe we were wrong in this situation. Maybe
Mhm.
we either we tried to reach out, and maybe we didn't do all that we could have done in that situation, and be willing to take some ownership there to say, no, we messed up. We did. We were wrong. We
Mhm.
had some other things going on at the time. We felt like they took precedence over this particular issue, and we were wrong in that regard. Like, just take
Yeah.
ownership of it. In other times, maybe that person just wasn't receptive of the help that you were trying to give,
Mhm.
and be able to talk through it and to say, hey, you do realize we tried to take these steps, and at the
Mhm.
time, you guys didn't seem to be very receptive. Now,
Mhm.
maybe we could have done a better job of communicating. Maybe we should have continued to show you more support. But I think you have to gauge in those times, is someone just looking for an excuse to get out? Or do they really want to have a
Yeah.
conversation about the situation?
Yeah. And there's, I think, and, and a lot of times people, you're not even able to compare apples and oranges in these situations because may have a Sunday morning attender. And then you have somebody that's a tender Sunday morning, but is in a small group, is in a Sunday school class. So they naturally have this net of relationships around them
Mm-hmm.
where when they
Mm-hmm.
fall on a hard time, there's people that have these built-in relationships that just surround them. Why? Because they put in the effort at connecting. Now, that's not to say I can name many cases in which I feel like our church failed someone and we should have done better. No doubt. But there are
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times when, hey, why didn't I get the kind of treatment that this person had? Well, this person is deeply involved relationally in a lot of people that are looking out for him. And then,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times you're also dealing with strange with different expectations. The expectations of one person is totally different than another. Like I recently, just a couple weeks ago, we had a lady in our church, and she does everything. Like she is just deeply involved. She's over our nursery, and she just does so much. And her dad passed away, and I drove to see her dad, or go to her dad's graveside. It was just a graveside, simple uh ceremony. And do you know how far I drove?
1,000 miles.
30 minutes. And
Oh.
she goes, I can't believe you came all the way out here. like, I'm like, you're like a vital member of my church. You're always there. You're always loving. You think like 30 minutes is like, I'm going to miss an opportunity to love on you. But then you have other people that, are not, and their expectations may be through the roof of why didn't you drive 8 hours for my parents' funeral when they're not all that involved. And so it's so strange. The personality affects things, the expectations of the people,
Well, and I think
for
this is
sure.
also a good reason why, whether you've got a plurality of elders, or you got, or you got deacons, there needs to be a way in which you're in constant contact with all of your members. And by that I mean, like, once a month when you gather for elders meeting, or if it's deacons, you know that you've contacted every member on your, or at least a majority of your members, or as much as they understand, like at least once a quarter, you're going to get a phone call or a text message from an elder or a deacon to check up on you, and to let you know if there's anything we need to be praying about, anything, so that they can know that they've got, things are being taken care of, but also that you've established that relationship where they can have a right expectation of these types of things. And again,
Hmm.
the responsibility falls on us as pastors, especially if these people are coming to join our churches. I think these are things that you can lay out and say to people, "Hey, I think you should have this expectation of us,"
Hmm.
and be able to kind of communicate clearly, because just like I mean, again, why do marriages fall apart? Because of unmet expectations.
Hmm.
And sometimes, you have to ask the question, well, were those expectations ever communicated, or were they uncommunicated? And kind of work through those things that way.
Hmm. Yeah. So what about, the church has fallen on hard times recently just because of cover-ups, the accusation
Mm.
of cover-ups. So that's really hurt a lot of people that this church covered up this thing that this pastor was doing. How do we need to look at those things?
Well, I think we have to take ownership of them. Those,
Mhm.
especially those churches. And if somebody's coming to you, if somebody's coming to Wyatt and they're saying, "Hey, I was hurt by this church because this pastor did these things," I think you have to say, "Hey, I'm really sorry that that happened." Like, especially if you were involved in it, or if it was some sort of connection to you in some sort of way. I'm really sorry that that happened. We could, we could try to say as much as possible, like we we're we don't want that to happen here. It's not our expectation of things like that to happen here. We want to take our duty as reporters of abuse, neglect, any of those. We want to take that pretty seriously. We try to take it serious here, but I think you also have to say, if you're not involved in that, if you're just reading about it on the internet or on social media, and suddenly you want to say, well, all of the church is terrible because they did these things. It's like what was revealed about some of these Southern Baptist reports. How many churches are there in the Southern Baptist Convention? There's a whole lot.
Mhm.
And if you take the number of churches that were kind of implicated, or clearly involved in those type of activities where something was covered up or not reported, if you take that number, compare it against how many Southern Baptist churches there are, that that percentage of churches shrinks drastically.
Mhm.
Like, this is
Yeah.
not as huge of a problem as some in the media and other people have tried to make it seem like. The vast majority of churches are just trying to be good, faithful churches, preaching the gospel, loving people,
Mhm.
ministering well. That's what churches want to do. That's what a lot of pastors want to do. And if you're gonna gauge the church as a whole because of some outside fringe behavior, then I think you're just probably looking for something to not go to church over.
Mhm. Yeah, and let's put aside like mandatory abuse reporting, like obviously, like that when you're dealing with the safety of people, you got to do due diligence. But there are peripheral things sometimes that it's complicated as a
Yeah.
pastor to know how public to make that. Like I feel like I keep lots of secrets. I got lots of secrets over 26 years of ministry here at the church. I've had people come to my office and say, "Here's something I did back then. I've never told that to anyone else except for
Hmm.
you. How do
Hmm.
I handle this with God? How do I?" And so I'm in many ways a secret keeper.
Yeah.
I don't like no one would be at Wyatt if I went every Sunday and just confessed everything that was confessed to me. And so, like a lot of times, I think, like in seminary, they didn't tell us like what on these peripheral issues, like this is what you need to make public to your people. This is what you need to deal with publicly. This is what you need to deal with privately. It is hard and it's complicated. And so, I do extend some grace again. Those mandatory type things aside, I do extend some grace of like maybe situations where you second guess yourself and a lot of times you're acting on the knowledge that you had at the time and maybe
Hmm.
you did make a wrong decision but then a year later you found out this other that if you knew sooner you would have done this. And so man, just the strict just like perfection that sometimes we demand from pastors is no one can live up. No one could perfectly navigate the things that pastors have to navigate on a daily and weekly basis.
No, but it goes back to what we said at the very beginning about people extending just the thought of the good intentions, and people
Mhm.
extending that level of grace and understanding that people put into unique situations or circumstances that it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback. It's easy to go back and say, "Hey, look, this is what should have been done." Once all the facts are in, once everything's kind of played out, it's very easy to take that road and say, "How did you not see this?" Well, I didn't see it because I was in the middle of it. I didn't see it
Mhm.
because I didn't have all of the benefit of hindsight that we have now. I'm just
Mhm.
trying to make sure that this marriage can possibly stay intact. I'm just trying to make sure that this family isn't suddenly throwing itself um, uh, on on the rocks or whatever. Like I'm trying to hold things together as best as I possibly can, and I don't know all the things that I will one day know or that one day come to
Mhm.
light. And I
Yeah.
think that's just not the way we work today. We expect everyone to have all the knowledge because we think we have all the knowledge, maybe because of, internet, AI, whatever else. I don't know. But that's just
Mhm.
it's not the way that it works in, as
Yeah.
you mentioned, in reality and in ministry, that you don't always know everything until you know everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a couple other things we could talk about, but I think we need to get down into some practical outworkings of this. So, like, first off, like we've talked a little bit about this in some of this, but like, how do you help a person like work through? Okay, this criticism's valid. This criticism is probably not valid, or maybe in this situation, this part of your criticism is valid. This part is not. How do we help people? Like we don't want to defend it, like I don't want to say
Yeah.
defend the church, but how do we help like people walk through, maybe someone that's saying like I'm going to leave the church altogether, I'm leaving Christ over this failure of the church. Like how do we, first of all, how do we help them uh differentiate between like legit criticism and maybe some judgment that you have towards your church that is maybe wrong, and then after that, let's talk about when the church has truly failed, how do you help people work through that?
Yeah. First of all, I think we have to get back to really explaining to people and to communicating what the role and the responsibility of the church is.
Mhm.
What's the role and responsibility of the church? The church is here to preach Christ and to make Christ known and to make disciples of all people. That's what the church is purpose placed on earth to do, right? To be the embassies of the kingdom of God here on earth. The problem is it's filled with people that are sinners, that are sufferers, that are imperfect, and that goes for pastors as well as lay people. It is an across the board issue, and that we have to be willing to show grace to others as we have been shown grace. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. That's
Mhm.
that's the Lord's Prayer, like the most famous prayer. And most people, even if they're not church people, have some sort of concept of the Lord's Prayer. And I think what we have to do is kind of be willing to say, like, look at a lot of the areas that the church has failed or the church has been accused of failing. And it's oftentimes when the church loses its mission, when there's mission drift, when it's getting away from the things that it's supposed to really be focusing on. And when the church is focused on the gospel and making disciples, I mean, I really think the church is doing well, and I would really point people to that. Like, if you're looking for a church that is truly dedicated to being a true church, then find a church that is committed to preaching Christ and making disciples, and it is staying on that mission.
Mhm.
And like direct people at that, help churches understand that this is your role, and then perhaps a lot of these issues will kind of be able to be worked out in time and things like that.
Mhm. So let's say someone comes to our church and they make known, or maybe you just ask them in a membership interview, and that they see a huge failure in their former church, or the church they grew up in or something, and you can tell, call it church hurt or whatever you want to. How do you help a potential member, like, first of all, make sure they don't walk away from Christ,
Hmm.
but also that they would jump into another church and take that risk of being hurt again? How do we help people do
Well,
that?
I think first of all, where we're able to maybe help with healing, like if it's a legitimate issue where they were abused verbally, emotionally, something like that. I think we have to work through that. Like, tell me about that situation. How long did it happen?
Hmm.
What are the details? Uh, I think you want to show them as best as we possibly can that we're not going to take that abuse and beat them over the head with it, or do something to kind of re-victimize them, or any of those types of things. That we actually genuinely do care about helping them to process what's happened, and how to navigate through that. That's something that we do, that we've had a couple of instances of here at the ABS, where you get college kids that come in, and they think they've gone through some sort of church hurt, or family hurt connected to church, and you really want to try to say, okay, let's talk about that. How do we navigate that? How do we think through that? What are the things that transpired? um do you understand that's not how things should work? And in healthy churches, among healthy Christians, those are things that hopefully aren't going to be repeated.
Hmm.
But what you can't do is say that now all of Christianity and all churches are bad and are this thing,
Hmm.
because that's not true either. And
Yeah.
we've got to point them to truth, because what happens is lies begin to dominate their lives.
Hmm.
They're lying to themselves. They're lying to everyone around them, and they have to say, and we have to help them say, no, that's stop believing lies. Here's the truth, that God is good, that Christ has come to save us, and that his bride will be purified one day. And
Hmm.
that those are the things that we want them to see, and that we want them to recognize, and that we're willing to walk with them as long as it takes for them to get to that place.
Hmm.
I think that's where we have to make the effort.
Yeah. And I would say also be curious about why someone is coming to your church. If they're not new to the area, you need to ask them, "Hey, why are you especially, maybe, it's different if they haven't been in church for 10 years, and you don't really have to address that kind of stuff. Maybe you do, but if they're, were faithful church members at this other church until last week, and now they're wanting to join yours, like, you need to walk through, and, hey, why? Like,
Yeah.
what happened? Because, we like to have new members. New members it's good to have new members. We want to grow. And so it's easy sometimes to ignore those questions when those questions really do need to be asked. We had a couple come. I appreciated this about them. They said, like, one of them, yeah. Anyway, they've been hurt by a pastor, um, and just been treated wrongly. And they said, "Hey, we're about to we want to join here, but we need a little time." They're like, "Well, hey, we're church people. We're going to be church people again. We're going to be involved, but we just need a breather, and we'll let you know when that." And I just appreciate them being up front. And then, sure enough, within the year, they're just involved in everything, and some of my favorite church members right now. And so sometimes when they're not volunteering that, we're gonna need to ask those questions, like, "Hey, are you bringing?" Because that hurt's coming with them. So it's going to be exposed probably, and it may be aimed at you if you're not careful. And so it's good to be curious about why are you bringing some church hurt?
Yeah, and I mean, we all have baggage. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, we all
Hmm.
have baggage. We all have a past. We all have past experiences, and if we're not careful, we we jump into situations before we're ready to, either out of obligation or something like that, and we never really deal with
Hmm.
what happened. Why
Hmm.
did we experience that? What red flags did we not see? Or what warning signs were there that we didn't pick up on? Or what did we do? What did we do and say that facilitated that level of action or inaction? And I think this is, we live in a society today, if we're not careful, where people want to be the victim and they never want to really ask questions that reveals their level of responsibility in what transpired. And I think that's the only way that we can get that people can move on and they can get real kind of healing or restoration through some of this stuff, is to realize, okay, where could I have taken responsibility in this? Now, if it's something that happened when you were a minor or a child, I mean, that's totally outside of, this type of thing. But if we're talking about
Hmm.
adults and we're talking about people that are coming, again, like you mentioned, coming to our church because they're fleeing from another church in another situation. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it was just something possibly totally out of their control. And if that's the case,
Hmm.
that's the case. And
Yeah,
you want to just be
sure.
able to say, "Hey, we love you. We're here for you. Whatever we can do, we want to do." But other
Hmm.
times, you want to be able to say, "Hey, maybe we need to talk about this a little bit more and see where we could have offered, or you could have been more responsible to what was
Hmm.
happening, and how would you have responded differently, knowing what you know now? How would you have responded differently, and are you going to be able to pick up on things next time that are going to help you to communicate and to be prepared, stuff
Hmm.
like that."
Hmm. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about, but I don't think we have the time, and so for that reason, we'll probably save this for next month. But how do we deal with church hurt when you're the pastor? When the sheep have teeth and tear you apart, and you probably have some good advice for that because more than I do. But Let's save that for next month's podcast, and because I think that's a big one, which we
So you
talk to
just want you are
pastors.
you just don't want to do a counseling session for me? Is that what this is about? This
Yeah, I'm a little tired today. I don't have time. No, no, I just don't want to rush it. I'm feeling like
Yeah,
if we did that right now, there's too much to say about that issue, and so let's save that for next month.
sounds good.
But go ahead and
You ready to close this
get us
out?
out here.
Hey,
Yeah.
guys, we really do. We love the church, and we love church members, and we love the body of Christ, and we want them to be healthy, and we want you to
Hmm.
be healthy, pastors. But we know sometimes things are hard and things are difficult. But it's our job as shepherds to care for the sheep, and so we hope that this episode's been helpful, hopefully to the sheep, if for those that are listening, that we know that there are times when churches maybe go too far, pastors go too far, and we want you to know that that is not the intention. That's not what we think should be the norm. But at the same time, man, God's given us grace, and we want to be willing to forgive as we've been forgiven. And so we just want to
Hmm.
encourage you in that way. Thanks for listening. Hope this episode's been helpful. I hope it has been an excellent episode, Adam. And until next time, we pray that you guys continue to have healthy pulpits and healthy churches. And we'll see you. We'll see you again.